While my husband was away for work, I received a message from his mother saying, "Your marriage is over and I've taken the kids to our family home." I responded with, "You won't be able to keep them." When he came back, he found a house empty and a new life waiting for me. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. A simple vibration against the wooden nightstand. At first, I barely registered it. The scent of freshly washed linen filled the room as I neatly arranged the last pile of clothes. It was a routine task, one that carried a quiet satisfaction. But when I picked up my phone, everything changed. A message from my mother-in-law. The preview on the screen sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, my pulse quickening as my thumb hovered over the notification. Something felt wrong. I took a deep breath and tapped the message open. "Your marriage is over. I've taken the kids to our family home." Betrayal cuts deep, but revenge carves the path to freedom. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. A fight for justice, a mother's war, and a lesson for those who think they can control the ones they underestimate. If you believe in strength, in rising from the ashes, in taking back what's yours, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the best revenge is watching them lose everything they tried to steal. Let's begin. For a moment, my mind refused to process the words. They stood there, stark and unyielding, a sentence that reshaped my entire existence in a single instant. My knees nearly buckled beneath me and I reached for the dresser to steady myself. Oh, this had to be a misunderstanding. I read the message again and again, but the words didn't change. The laundry in my hands slipped to the floor as a deep hollow ache spread through my chest. My children, my babies, had been taken from me. I tried to call my husband. Straight to voicemail. And again. No answer. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, my hands trembling as I switched to calling my mother-in-law. He had to explain. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was eerily calm, almost triumphant. "It's for the best," she said before I could even speak. "They belong with their family, not in that house with you." Her words were a blade cutting deep into my heart. Not in that house with me. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Where are they?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Safe," she said, her tone filled with smug satisfaction. "You'll understand soon enough." Understand? I already understood. She had planned this. She had waited for the moment my husband was away to strike. She had always wanted control, always undermining me, always looking for ways to push me aside. And now she had taken my children. A burning sensation filled my chest, but it wasn't grief anymore. It was something sharper. Something stronger. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "You won't be able to keep them," I said, my voice cold. For the first time there was silence on the other end. She hadn't expected that. I ended the call. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry to her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I took a step back and looked at the house around me. The home I had built. The place I had loved and filled with memories. And now it was empty. But not for long. I sat down, my mind racing with possibilities. She thought she had won. She thought she had backed me into a corner, that I would break down and accept this fate. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I pulled my laptop toward me and started looking up custody laws. Every law. Every loophole. Every weapon I could use against her. She had played her hand. Now it was my turn. I wouldn't just take my children back. I would make sure she never had the power to take anything from me again. I sat there in the dim glow of my laptop screen, scrolling through legal documents, custody laws, and anything that could give me an edge. The silence in the house was deafening, an eerie contrast to the usual chaos of my children running around. I had spent years building a life inside these walls, but tonight, it felt hollow, like a shell of the home it once was. The realization settled in my bones. I had never truly belonged here. Not in this marriage. Not in this family. Looking back, the signs had always been there. My mother-in-law had never accepted me. From the moment my husband introduced me to his family, she had sized me up with that calculated look, her lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. She had been polite, too polite. The kind of politeness that was meant to keep someone at arm's length while pretending to be warm. At first, I thought I could win her over. I made every effort. I attended every family gathering, cooked meals the way she liked them, dressed the way she subtly hinted would be more appropriate. And for a while I convinced myself I was making progress. But then came the small exclusions. The whispers behind closed doors, the decisions made without me. The first time I realized my husband was siding with her over me, it had been about something trivial. Our wedding venue. She had insisted on one location. I had chosen another. I should have seen it for what it was then. He told me, it's just a venue. It's important to her. So I let it go. Then came the next thing. The way she accidentally called me by his ex-girlfriend's name in front of extended family. The way she inserted herself into every parenting decision once our children were born. The way she made it clear in small but deliberate ways that I was merely a guest in her son's life. And my husband, he had let it happen. I wasn't stupid. I had felt the shift over the years. The way his calls grew shorter when he traveled for work. The way his texts became less affectionate. The way he always seemed to be defending his mother instead of me. He never outright betrayed me, but betrayal isn't always about one big act. Sometimes, it's the slow erosion of trust, the gradual decay of a foundation that was never as strong as you believed. And now I was staring at the result of that decay. My marriage wasn't just over because my mother-in-law had taken my children. It had been over for a long time. I had just refused to see it. A notification flashed on my screen. An email from my husband. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. We need to talk. I know you're upset, but this is what's best for everyone. The kids will be happier with my mother for now. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I stared at the words, my fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles ached. He was treating this like a business arrangement, like some logistical inconvenience rather than the complete destruction of our family. Happier? With her? He had no idea what he had done. I closed my laptop, standing up so quickly that the chair scraped against the floor. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for the first time in years I saw myself clearly. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't devastation. This was clarity. For years, I had believed that if I loved hard enough, if I fought long enough, I could hold on to this marriage. That I could prove to his family that I belonged, that I was worthy. I wasn't going to make that mistake anymore. I reached for my phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hey, it's me, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. There was a pause on the other end. I was wondering when you'd call. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. My best friend. The one person who had seen the warning signs long before I had been willing to admit them. The one who had told me on more than one occasion, you're losing yourself in this marriage. I had pushed her away, believing she didn't understand. But now I knew she had seen the truth more clearly than I ever had. I need your help, I said. He didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. And just like that, I took my first step toward reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to cry over what was lost. I was going to take back what was mine. The silence between us stretched, heavy with unspoken words. My best friend had always been my anchor, the one who saw through the cracks in my life even when I refused to. And now, as I sat there gripping my phone, I felt the weight of every mistake I had made. Tell me everything, she said, her voice firm but calm. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. They took my kids, I said. The words sounded foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. His mother. While he was away. And he let it happen. A sharp intake of breath came from the other end. I knew she was manipulative, but this is next level. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. He sent me an email. Said it was for the best and that the kids would be happier with her. There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. One that held no humor. Happier? With the same woman who tried to control every part of your life? The same woman who questioned every decision you made as a mother? I pressed my fingers against my temples. Exactly. Okay, she said, her voice shifting into something steadier. Listen to me. We're not going to react emotionally. We're going to be strategic. They think they've backed you into a corner, but what they don't realize is, you're not the same woman who let them walk all over her. I closed my eyes. The words sank in, settling into the space where my grief had been. I need to know how far this goes, I said, my voice tightening with resolve. Because if he was willing to do this, then there's more I don't know. Then we find out, she said. And we do it quietly. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I couldn't afford to react impulsively. If I wanted to win this, I needed to know exactly what I was up against. After ending the call, I sat in the dimly lit room, staring at the blank walls. Everything felt different now. My home, my marriage, even my past. It all seemed like a carefully constructed illusion, one that had crumbled the moment that message appeared on my screen. I opened my laptop again, but this time I wasn't looking at custody laws. I was looking at our finances. If he was willing to take my children away, what else had he been hiding? The number stared back at me, but something felt off. Our accounts should have been in better shape. We had a budget, investments, things I had carefully managed over the years. But the balance was lower than I expected. I clicked through statements, searching for anything unusual. And then I saw it. A transfer. Multiple, actually. Small amounts at first, nothing that would raise suspicion. But over time they added up. And they all led to an account I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. Where was the money going? I grabbed my phone again and dialed the one person who could make sense of this. Our financial advisor. The man who had always handled our investments, the one my husband and I had both trusted. He answered on the second ring. Hey, long time no talk. Everything all right? I forced a calm tone. I just had a quick question about our accounts. I was going through the statements and noticed some transactions I don't recognize. Can you help me understand them? Of course, he said. Which ones are you looking at? I gave him the dates and amounts. There was a slight pause before he spoke again. Oh, those. Yeah, those were transfers your husband requested a few months ago. He said he was restructuring some of your assets for. My breath caught. Wait. A few months ago? Yeah, he confirmed. He mentioned it was to cover some unexpected expenses and investments. He was pretty clear about it. I gripped the phone tighter. Months ago. Long before I had any idea my marriage was crumbling. Long before I knew he had been preparing for this. I managed to thank him before ending the call. My mind was spinning, piecing together the puzzle I had ignored for too long. This wasn't just about my children. He had been planning something. Moving money. Cutting me out. And I had been blind to it. I clenched my jaw, the betrayal settling into something deeper. Something stronger. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't fight back. I opened my email, staring at his message once more. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. A slow, cold smile formed on my lips. He had no idea what difficult looked like. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, connecting every missing piece. The financial transfers, the secrecy, the way my husband had systematically moved money out of our accounts. It wasn't just a careless oversight. It was intentional. He had been setting the stage for months, making sure that when he finally pulled the rug out from under me, I wouldn't have the resources to fight back. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't going to sit back and let them dictate my fate. I had lost my children, my home felt like a stranger's house, and the man I had trusted had betrayed me in a way I never saw coming. But I still had one thing left. My will to fight. My fingers hovered over my keyboard before I opened a new email. I needed legal counsel and I needed it fast. Every second that passed was another moment they had the upper hand. I had no intention of giving them any more power over my life. I typed a brief but urgent message to a highly recommended attorney I had found after hours of research. The email was to the point. I need immediate legal assistance regarding an unauthorized custody change and financial discrepancies in my marriage. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. As I waited for a response, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my husband. A new email. My hands clenched as I clicked it open. I know this is difficult for you, but I need you to see reason. The kids are already adjusting and I don't want to drag this into something bigger than it needs to be. My mother is providing them with stability, and this arrangement is what's best for them. Please don't make things harder. I exhaled slowly, forcing down the rage bubbling inside me. Don't make things harder? That was easy for him to say when he had been the one orchestrating this entire scheme behind my back. His condescending tone, the way he tried to make it seem like I was the unreasonable one, it only fueled my determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my children. The phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't from him. It was my lawyer. He had responded. I can meet you first thing in the morning. Bring any documentation you have. Financial records, communication logs, anything that proves what they've done. We'll assess your case and move forward strategically. A wave of relief mixed with anticipation surged through me. Finally, I was taking action. I wouldn't be left in the dark anymore, waiting for them to strike next. I was stepping into the game they thought I had already lost. The night was restless. I barely slept, my mind replaying every conversation, every moment I had ignored the warning signs. But when the sun broke through the curtains, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same woman I had been yesterday. I arrived at the lawyer's office with a file of documents, neatly organized evidence of the betrayal that had been unfolding for months. He listened intently, taking notes as I laid everything out. My husband's financial transfers, the sudden custody change, the messages from his mother. When I finished, he looked at me with a mixture of understanding and determination. "You have a case," he said. "A strong one. They didn't have the right to take your children without legal consent. And the financial movements? That's another issue we can pursue." For the first time in days, I felt a sense of control return. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was strategizing. "We'll start with an emergency custody hearing," he continued. "You need to file a petition to get your children back immediately. We'll also look into the financial records and see if there's anything legally actionable there." I nodded, absorbing every word. This was happening. I was fighting back. As I left his office, a new kind of energy filled me. The battle had begun, but I wasn't afraid. My husband and his mother thought they could corner me, that I would collapse under the weight of their manipulations. They had no idea I was just getting started. Walking out of the lawyer's office, I felt the shift. A weight had been lifted, but it was replaced with something sharper. Purpose. I had spent years bending, compromising, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. But not anymore. Now I was playing by my own rules. The streets were buzzing with life, but my mind was miles away, already calculating my next steps. My lawyer was filing for an emergency custody hearing, but I couldn't sit around waiting for things to unfold at a legal pace. I had to act now. I returned home, stepping into the house that suddenly felt foreign. The walls held memories, laughter, love, but also shadows of a past that no longer existed. I looked around, my gaze settling on the framed photos on the mantel. Smiling faces. A perfect family. A perfect lie. I grabbed a box and started packing. Not clothes, not personal belongings, but everything that mattered. Legal documents. Birth certificates. Financial records. Anything that could be used against me, I gathered it all. Every trace of my dependence on him was erased bit by bit. Then I moved to the bank accounts. I transferred what was legally mine into a separate account, one that he couldn't touch. Every penny he had siphoned off was accounted for, but he had overlooked something. I had always been careful. I had my own emergency funds quietly set aside over the years, never expecting to use them but always knowing I might need to. And now I did. I wasn't just leaving, I was disappearing. By the time he and his mother realized what had happened, there would be nothing left to take from me. I wouldn't be the helpless woman they thought I was, waiting for them to dictate my life. The hardest part was walking into my children's empty rooms. Their toys were still scattered on the floor, their tiny clothes neatly folded in drawers. I ran my fingers over my son's favorite stuffed bear, my daughter's tiny ballet shoes. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't the end. I would get them back. I had no doubt about that. But when they returned, they would come home to a mother who had rebuilt her life without their father's shadow looming over her. The next step was securing my exit. I had a friend, an old college roommate who had always told me, "If you ever need an escape, my door is open." I never thought I'd take her up on it. But now I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I need a place to stay." "Then get here," she said without hesitation. "Whatever you need, I've got you." I packed only the essentials, just enough to leave without a trace. My mother-in-law had taken my children, thinking she had won, but she underestimated me. I wasn't just going to take them back. I was going to ensure she never had the chance to pull this stunt again. Before leaving, I stood in the center of the house one last time. I had walked into this marriage full of hope, believing in love, believing in him. Now I was walking away with something far more valuable: clarity. When my husband came back, he would find a house stripped of everything meaningful. He had expected to return to a broken woman, pleading for her family back. Instead, he would return to emptiness. And by the time he realized what had happened, it would already be too late. By the time I arrived at my friend's place, the reality of my choices settled in. I wasn't just running, I was positioning myself for a fight that would determine the future of my children. There was no room for hesitation, no space for self-doubt. I had already lost too much. Now it was about taking back what was mine. She welcomed me with open arms, no questions, just quiet understanding. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: safety. Not the illusion of it that my husband had crafted, but real, undeniable security. Still, I couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. My lawyer had already set things in motion. The emergency custody petition was filed, and now I had to prepare for what was coming next. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents, messages, and legal papers. Every call, every financial transfer, every attempt my husband's family made to undermine me, I documented it all. They had made a crucial mistake by underestimating me, by assuming I would crumble. Instead, I was building my case brick by brick. A few days passed, each one feeling like an eternity. My lawyer kept me updated, assuring me that things were moving forward. But patience had never been my strength, not when my children were caught in the middle of this battle. I had no doubt that my mother-in-law was feeding them lies, telling them I had abandoned them, twisting reality to fit her own narrative. The thought made my blood boil. Then my lawyer called with news that made my heart race. "We have a court date," he said. "Next week. Be ready." A surge of emotions flooded me. Relief, anticipation, determination. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment they would have to answer for what they had done. But just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, my phone buzzed with another message. This time from my husband. "Are you really going to take this to court? You're making a mistake." Mistake? The audacity of that sentence nearly made me laugh. As if he hadn't been the one making calculated moves behind my back. As if he had given me a choice. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The next time we would be face to face, it would be in a courtroom where his words would carry no weight against the truth. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. My mind kept playing out different scenarios. His mother showing up with her usual arrogance, my husband trying to manipulate the judge, the looks on their faces when they realized they had lost. But no matter how many times I imagined it, one thing remained the same. I wasn't walking into that courtroom as a victim. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the wrinkles in my blouse. My reflection stared back at me, and for the first time in a long time, I recognized the woman in front of me. Strong. Resilient. Unbreakable. Walking into the courthouse, I felt every pair of eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. My husband was already inside, sitting next to his mother, who looked as smug as ever. But the moment they saw me, that confidence flickered. Good. Let them be nervous. The hearing began, and I watched as my lawyer dismantled every lie they had tried to build. The evidence was clear. The sudden, unauthorized custody change. The financial manipulations. The judge's expression remained unreadable, but I knew one thing. They saw through the deception. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't hold back. I told the truth, every painful, ugly detail of what had been done to me, to my children. My voice never wavered. I wasn't just speaking as a mother fighting for her kids. I was speaking as a woman who had been pushed too far. By the time the hearing ended, the room was thick with tension. The judge took a moment before delivering the decision, but I had already seen the truth in their eyes. When the ruling came, my hands clenched into fists. Custody was mine. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. My husband sat frozen. They had lost. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. My battle wasn't over, but I had won the first, most important fight. And now, it was time for them to understand the consequences of underestimating me. Walking out of the courtroom with the ruling in my favor should have felt like victory. And in some ways, it did. But there was no time to celebrate, no moment to relish in their defeat. The battle wasn't over. It had only shifted into the next phase. I had won custody, but I knew my husband and his mother wouldn't accept it easily. They would fight back, look for loopholes, twist the truth however they could. I had to be ready for whatever came next. As I stepped into the courthouse hallway, I felt their eyes burning into me. My mother-in-law stood stiff, her hands gripping the strap of her purse as if squeezing it could stop her world from crumbling. My husband, on the other hand, was harder to read. He wasn't angry, not yet. His expression was cold, calculating, as if already working out his next move. That was what worried me the most. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly as I passed him. I stopped but didn't turn to face him. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." His mother scoffed. You think this is over? You think some ruling changes anything? You'll never keep them away from us. I turned then, meeting her gaze with a calm she didn't expect. You took my children from me once. That won't happen again. Her lips parted as if to say more, but I didn't wait. I walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each deliberate step. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. My lawyer met me outside, his demeanor professional but firm. They might appeal, he warned. Or try to file for joint custody. They won't let this go. I know, I said. That's why I need to stay ahead of them. I had spent too long reacting, waiting for them to make the next move. Now I needed to be the one setting the pace. They had played this game believing I was weak, believing I would fold under pressure. It was time to prove them wrong. The first step was reclaiming my home. Not the physical house I had left behind, but the life they had stolen from me. My children deserved stability, a place where they felt safe, a mother who was present and strong. I had been that mother before, but now I had to become even more. I spent the next few days settling into our new routine. My children were hesitant at first, unsure of what to believe after all the confusion their grandmother had planted in their minds. I didn't push them. Instead, I focused on making things feel normal again. Morning routines, school drop-offs, bedtime stories. Little by little they softened. The walls that had been built between us, the doubts that had been sown, started to crack. One evening, as I tucked my son into bed, he finally asked the question I had been waiting for. Grandma said you didn't want us anymore. That's why we had to go with her. I swallowed the knot in my throat, keeping my voice gentle. That's not true, sweetheart. I never wanted to be away from you. His small fingers clutched the blanket. Then why did Daddy say you were angry all the time? I exhaled slowly. Sometimes grown-ups have problems and they don't always tell the truth. But I promise you, no matter what anyone says, I love you. And I will always fight for you. He seemed to think about that for a moment before nodding, as if storing the information away for later. It wasn't instant healing, but it was a start. The next day my phone rang. My lawyer. You were right, he said without preamble. They're trying to contest the ruling. I wasn't surprised. If anything, I was relieved. It meant they were predictable. I could prepare. What's their argument? They're claiming you're emotionally unstable. That removing the children from their established environment would be damaging. A bitter laugh escaped me. They're the ones who ripped them away from me in the first place. They're banking on dragging this out. Making you look unfit in the process. I should have been furious, but all I felt was resolve. Let them try. I spent the next week gathering evidence, building an even stronger case. I compiled messages, bank statements, testimonies from teachers and family friends. Every move they had made, every lie they had told, I documented it all. They wanted to question my fitness as a mother? Fine. I would bury them in the truth. The day of the appeal hearing arrived, and as I entered the courthouse, I could see it in their faces. Doubt. My husband, his mother, they weren't as sure of themselves anymore. They had expected me to back down. Instead, I had dug in. The hearing proceeded with the usual legal back and forth, their lawyer trying to paint me as emotional, reactive, incapable of providing a stable environment. But my lawyer was ruthless. Every accusation they made was countered with facts. Every claim of instability met with proof of their own manipulations. When the ruling came down, it was final. Full custody remained mine. I didn't look at them as I left the courtroom. I didn't need to. The silence behind me spoke volumes. Outside, I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. It was over. Really over. I had won. And they had lost. Completely. The courthouse doors shut behind me, and the weight of it all finally hit me. I had won. My children were mine, legally and unquestionably. No more fights, no more appeals, no more manipulations. The final ruling had sealed their fate, and for the first time in a long time I could breathe. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their downfall. I glanced at my phone. No messages from my husband. No desperate attempts to bargain or threaten. Nothing from his mother either. The silence was louder than any argument they could have thrown at me. I knew they were reeling, scrambling to understand how their perfect plan had collapsed so spectacularly. They had thought they were untouchable, that they had built an impenetrable web of control. But they had overlooked one crucial thing, me. That night, I tucked my children into bed, running my fingers through their hair as they drifted off to sleep. They were safe now, far away from the manipulative hands that had tried to steal them from me. But as I watched them, a lingering thought took root. They weren't just trying to take my children. They were trying to erase me from their lives. And for that, they had to face the consequences. The next morning I started digging. My husband had been shifting money, moving it into hidden accounts before he ever told me our marriage was over. He thought I hadn't noticed that I had been too naive, too trusting to question where our finances were going. But I had documented everything. Every bank statement, every unauthorized withdrawal, every strange transaction that made no sense. And now I was about to expose it. I contacted my lawyer again. "There's something else I need to look into," I said, detailing the financial irregularities. He was quiet for a moment before responding, his voice calm but serious. "If what you're saying is true, he could be facing legal consequences beyond just the custody case." That was exactly what I wanted. I spent the next week preparing, going through years of records, highlighting every inconsistency, every shady business deal, every dollar that had vanished without explanation. Then, with my lawyer's guidance, I took everything to the authorities. The fallout was swift. I had expected it to take weeks, maybe months, for the cracks in his world to fully break open. But within days, whispers turned into full-blown investigations. My husband wasn't just moving money. He had been involved in questionable dealings that now placed him under serious scrutiny. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. He showed up at my door. I heard the knock and knew it was him before I even checked. When I opened it, he stood there looking disheveled, his usual arrogance replaced by something unfamiliar, fear. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I crossed my arms. "Talk about what? How you tried to erase me from my own children's lives. Or how you thought you could quietly steal money without anyone noticing." His jaw tightened. "You didn't have to do this." I let out a cold laugh. "You took my children away. You made me fight for them. You expected me to just disappear. And now you're upset because I fought back." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I made mistakes, all right? But you didn't have to take it this far. You could have just walked away." My expression hardened. "You walked away first. You just didn't expect me to survive without you." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was sinking in. I wasn't the woman he had once controlled. I had rebuilt myself stronger than before, and there was nothing he could say to change what had already been set in motion. "You ruined me," he finally said. I tilted my head, considering his words. Then I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself." With that, I shut the door, sealing the fate he had created for himself. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. As the door shut behind me, a finality settled over everything. The confrontation had ended, and with it, the last remnants of the life I had once known. My husband, ex-husband in every way that mattered, stood on the other side of that door, realizing the truth he had never prepared for. He had lost. Not just in court, not just in reputation, but in everything that truly mattered. And the best part? He had done it to himself. I leaned against the door for a moment, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading. He had no fight left in him, no more words to throw at me. He had come expecting to intimidate me, to guilt me into reversing his downfall. Instead, he had walked away with nothing. No children. No power. No control. For the first time in years, I was untouchable. I turned back toward the house, letting out a slow breath. My children were asleep in their rooms, unaware of what had just transpired. That was the way I wanted it. Their innocence had already been shaken enough by everything that had happened. I wouldn't let them carry any more of this weight. They deserved a life without the constant tug-of-war, without the whispers of manipulation, without the looming shadow of a family that had tried to take them from me. Stepping into the dimly lit living room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the mantel. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had once been afraid to speak up, to stand her ground. She wasn't the woman who had begged for acceptance from people who had never intended to give it. She wasn't the wife who had stayed up at night questioning where she had gone wrong. She was free. The following days passed in a blur of quiet victories. The house, once a space filled with uncertainty and tension, became a home again. Laughter started to return, tentative at first, but growing stronger with each passing day. My children, slowly but surely, were letting go of the confusion and doubt that had been planted in their minds. I saw it in the way they reached for me, in the way their eyes held trust instead of hesitation. But the fight wasn't completely over. My lawyer kept me updated on the legal fallout from my ex-husband's financial dealings. The authorities were moving in, digging deeper into his mismanaged funds, his shady business ties, the quiet disappearances of money that couldn't be explained. What had started as a custody battle had unraveled into something much bigger. He wasn't just losing his family, he was losing the carefully constructed empire he had built around deception. The phone calls started coming in not from him but from people in his world. Business associates, old acquaintances, even mutual friends who had once stayed neutral. They all had the same undertone in their voices, curiosity laced with panic. They wanted to know if the rumors were true, if I had really exposed him, if I had really taken everything. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't need to. But then one day a number flashed across my screen that made me pause. His mother. For a long moment I stared at the phone, debating whether to let it ring. Every instinct told me she had nothing to say that I needed to hear. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe closure, made me pick up. She didn't start with pleasantries. "You've ruined my son," she said, her voice sharp with barely restrained anger. I smiled to myself, settling onto the couch. "No," I corrected. "He ruined himself." "You think this is over?" she snapped. "You think taking the children and some money changes everything?" I let out a soft laugh. "I didn't take the children. I protected them. And as for the money? That's between him and the law." "You were never good enough for him," she hissed. "Never good enough for this family." The words should have hurt. Maybe once they would have. But now, they meant nothing. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I was never good enough. For him or for you. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me." She sucked in a sharp breath as if startled by my lack of reaction. She had expected the woman I used to be, the one she could manipulate, belittle, break down. But that woman was gone. "I just wanted you to know," I continued, "that you'll never control me again. And you'll never get another chance to hurt my children." There was silence on the other end, and then in a tone that was almost unreadable she said, "You really think you've won, don't you?" I smiled, leaning back. "Oh, I know I have." And with that I ended the call. I stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down and looked around the room. This was my life now. My home. My future. It didn't belong to them anymore. Later that evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Are we safe now, Mommy?" I brushed a hand over her hair, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." And for the first time in years I truly believed it. The night felt still, the weight of everything settling into place. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my children in the next room. For the first time in years I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the next fight, the next manipulation, the next betrayal. But even though I had won in court, even though I had shut the door on my ex-husband and his mother, one final chapter remained unfinished. The legal battle had secured my children's safety, but there was still justice to be served. My ex-husband had spent years deceiving me, shifting money into places he thought I would never find, making financial moves that would eventually collapse under scrutiny. And now the consequences of his actions were closing in on him. I checked my phone. A message from my lawyer. "Call me when you wake up. We need to discuss new developments." I knew what that meant. The walls were closing in on him. Morning arrived with a sense of anticipation. The sun was barely up when I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee, breathing in the crisp air. My phone buzzed and I answered immediately. "You're going to want to hear this," my lawyer said, his tone sharper than usual. "The authorities are moving forward with an official investigation into his financial dealings. The evidence you provided put everything in motion, but now, other people are coming forward." My fingers tightened around my cup. Other people? Business associates, former partners. People who had their suspicions but never had enough proof to take action. Your case cracked it open. What started as a custody battle turned into something much bigger. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. It was happening. They're looking into fraud, tax evasion, and a string of shady transactions. If they push forward with charges, he could be facing serious repercussions, my lawyer continued. This isn't just about financial penalties anymore. A strange sense of vindication settled over me. He had spent so long thinking he was untouchable, weaving lies, manipulating people, believing he could get away with everything. But now the truth was coming for him. I thought back to our last conversation, to the way he had stood at my doorstep, expecting me to fold, expecting me to feel guilt for his mistakes. He had no idea then how much deeper the consequences would run. Hours passed, and just as I was preparing breakfast for the kids, another call came through. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. There was silence on the line before a familiar voice spoke. "You did this." My ex-husband's voice was unsteady, but it wasn't anger that filled his tone. It was something else. Desperation. "You did this to yourself," I replied evenly. "You've been playing this game for years. You just finally lost." A bitter chuckle crackled through the receiver. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I protected my children," I said. "And I made sure you finally faced the consequences of everything you've done." His breath hitched, and for the first time I heard it, the panic. He wasn't just losing his money or his reputation. He was losing control. "They're saying I might lose everything," he murmured. "Everything?" I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He had built his world on deceit, arrogance, and manipulation, and now it was crumbling beneath him. For years I had been afraid of him, afraid of his power, afraid of what he could take from me. But now he was the one afraid. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself before delivering my final words. "You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy me." And with that I hung up. The weight of it all finally lifted. It was over. Not just the custody battle, not just the legal fights, but everything. His reign of control, his ability to manipulate, his belief that he could shape the world however he pleased. It was all gone. Justice had been served. As I turned back toward my children, watching them laugh over breakfast, I knew one thing for certain. We were finally free. My best friend stole my boyfriend, married him, and bragged about her perfect life. 10 years later, we met again at a high-end event. She said, "Still single, I see." I smiled and replied, "Meet my husband." The moment she saw his face, she went completely pale because it was supposed to be just another high-profile event, the kind where the rich and successful parade in their finest clothes and rub elbows with the city's elite. But the moment my eyes met hers across the crowded ballroom, everything stopped. He was Sarah. My Sarah, the one I had called my best friend for years, smiling with the same smugness that had made her unbearable all those years ago. But it wasn't just the way she stood there, confidently draped in a designer dress, that hit me like a freight train. It was the words she uttered as she spotted me standing there, alone. "Still single, I see," she said with a laugh that carried across the room like an obnoxious bell. My stomach twisted. Thank you all for joining me on this journey. If these stories resonate with you, hit subscribe and be part of this incredible community. Your support means everything, and together we can keep creating meaningful content. Let's get started. I hadn't prepared for this moment, but I sure had planned for it. Smiling, I calmly replied, "Meet my husband." As soon as I said those words, I felt a rush of satisfaction that surged through my veins, a momentary victory over the years of pain and betrayal. Then, as Sarah's eyes flickered toward the man beside me, the world seemed to slow down. Her face, once so self-assured, went completely pale. The color drained from her cheeks, and I could see her composure falter for the first time in a long while. She blinked, mouth agape, as the realization dawned upon her. It was him, the man she thought she had stolen from me. James. The man she married. The man I had once loved. The one who had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. The one I had thought I lost forever. But he was mine now, my husband. The sting of betrayal, the anger that simmered inside me over the years, the tears I shed in silence, all of it suddenly felt like it had led to this moment. My heart had been shattered once before, but now, standing beside James, it was whole again. Not just healed, but stronger. The pain of the past was no longer in control. The echo of Sarah's triumph over me had been muted by the life I had carefully built. A life that was so much more than she could ever imagine. I saw her trying to regain her composure, forcing a smile, but it was too late. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, processing the shock of what was happening in front of her. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. She had thought she would always have the upper hand, the control over everything that once belonged to me. But now it was my turn to shine. James placed his hand on my back, a quiet show of support, a silent acknowledgement of what we had been through together. I could feel the tension in the air as everyone around us waited for the confrontation to unfold. But there was no need for words to be spoken. The look on Sarah's face was enough to tell the entire story. The once perfect life she had built with my ex-boyfriend was a house of cards, and now, it was falling apart before her very eyes. Sarah and I had been inseparable growing up. She was the one who knew all my secrets, my fears, my dreams. I had shared everything with her, trusted her in ways I had never trusted anyone else. When I started dating James, she was there offering advice, support, and acting as the ever-loyal friend. But somewhere along the way something changed. Maybe it was the way James started to pay more attention to her than me, or the way she always found a reason to be around him just when we were alone. I dismissed the warnings, brushed them off as paranoia, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The first time I caught them together, I thought my world had come crashing down. I walked into the living room of our shared apartment to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her hand on James's leg, whispering to him in a way that was far too intimate for friends. The sight shattered me, but what hurt even more was the realization that James didn't even try to pull away. In that moment I knew what had been happening all along. They had betrayed me in the worst possible way. At first I didn't know what to do. I wanted to confront them, to scream at them, but I was paralyzed by the weight of it all. I loved James and I had never imagined that Sarah would betray me like this. But the truth was undeniable and it was inescapable. She didn't even apologize when I found out. Instead, she acted as if nothing had changed, as if I should be happy for them. She married him and I was left behind, the fool who had trusted both of them. The years that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I watched from afar as Sarah posted photos of their so-called perfect life together. Every picture on social media felt like a knife in my chest. There were vacations, parties, their wedding, moments I should have shared with James, moments I had once dreamed of. But those dreams had been stolen from me, replaced with the bitter reality of their treachery. As for James, he had moved on easily as if our love had meant nothing. But I couldn't let go. For years, I lived in the shadow of their happiness, consumed by my anger, my hurt, and my desire for revenge. I wanted to make them feel the same way I did. The loneliness, the betrayal, the crushing pain that had never quite gone away. And then something changed in me. I stopped focusing on them and started focusing on myself. I decided that I deserved more than the life I had been handed. I went back to school, built my career, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me. Slowly, the pieces of my life began to fall back into place. I didn't need James or Sarah to define me anymore. I was stronger, more resilient, and most importantly, I was in control. It wasn't until years later, when I received the invitation to this high-profile event, that I realized how far I had come. The thought of seeing Sarah again after everything she had done to me didn't make me nervous. It didn't bring up the familiar pang of sadness I had once felt. No, this time it was different. I had everything I needed, everything I had worked so hard to build. And now, I was ready to show her that the life she stole from me had been replaced by something far greater. The moment I saw Sarah's face, standing in front of me with that same air of superiority, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. No anger. No jealousy. Just a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She had never truly been the one I needed to worry about. I had won. And I was ready for her to see that. Her reaction when she saw James at my side was everything I had hoped for. The smug smile faltered, and for a split second I saw the truth in her eyes. She was no longer the winner. That title belonged to me now. The moment I saw Sarah's face crumble, I realized something important. All the years of pain, all the heartache I had buried deep inside had finally come to a head. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, the person I used to be before I let them drag me through their web of lies. But before this night, before standing in front of Sarah and James again, I hadn't fully grasped how far I had come. I hadn't seen the strength I had built within myself until now. I used to be so sure of everything, so secure in the world I had crafted with my best friend by my side and my boyfriend at my arm. Life seemed simple then, like everything was falling into place. When Sarah and I met as teenagers, we were inseparable. It was as though we shared a special bond, a sisterhood that no one could break. We understood each other on a level most people couldn't. I was the quieter one, content with my thoughts and books, while she was the outgoing extrovert who knew how to make everyone laugh and feel at ease. Together we complemented each other perfectly. She was the loud spark to my calm glow, and I had never questioned the balance. When James entered our lives, things shifted slightly. I'll admit it, I had fallen for him hard. At first it was innocent enough, just a guy I met at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, attentive, and kind. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world to be with someone like him. But looking back, I see the signs I had missed, the cracks in the foundation that I had ignored. Sarah, as my best friend, always knew how to make me feel secure, and I trusted her with everything, including my heart. James and I started dating when I was in college. Felt like a dream come true. I had always wanted someone like him, smart, driven, and handsome. But something started to shift in the way Sarah looked at him. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. After all, she had always been close to the people I cared about, so I didn't think anything of it. But then it started getting harder to ignore. Sarah would text James late at night, and they'd meet for coffee under the pretense of talking about some project or schoolwork. At the time, I chalked it up to their shared interests and thought nothing more of it. How naive I had been. The signs became clearer as time went on. I began to notice the lingering glances, the way Sarah would always find an excuse to touch his arm or lean in just a bit too close. When I confronted her about it once, she brushed it off, claiming I was overreacting. I wanted to believe her. I really did. She was my best friend, after all, the person who had always been there for me. She wouldn't betray me like that, right? But the doubt was there, a quiet whisper at the back of my mind that I tried to ignore. The breaking point came one rainy evening when I came home early from a dinner with friends. I opened the door to find them, Sarah and James, sitting on the couch in a way that no best friend and her boyfriend should ever sit. There was laughter, but it wasn't the carefree sound I was used to. It was different, like they were in on some private joke that I wasn't part of. I saw Sarah's hand rest on his knee, her fingers lingering a bit too long. The chill in my bones wasn't from the rain outside. It was the sudden realization that everything I had known had just shattered. I couldn't move at first. I stood there in the doorway, feeling my heart pound in my chest. They hadn't seen me yet, but I didn't need to hear the words to understand what was going on. My best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone, was not just flirting with my boyfriend, she was stealing him from me. Slowly, I stepped back, closing the door quietly behind me before either of them could notice I was there. I needed space to breathe, to process what I had just seen. But it was clear now, my worst fear had come true. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway for hours, tears blurring my vision, until finally I took a deep breath and told myself something I hadn't been able to say before. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I wasn't going to let Sarah and James have the power to tear apart my life. So I did what anyone would do when faced with such a betrayal. I ran. I left without saying a word to either of them. I moved across the country to start over, to build a life that had nothing to do with them. I threw myself into my career, finding solace in the work that I loved. I surrounded myself with new friends who didn't know about the past that still haunted me, and in time I learned to rebuild my confidence. But the pain of their betrayal never fully left me. It was always there, lurking beneath the surface, a reminder of how easily someone you trust can hurt you. Over the years, I watched as Sarah and James built a life together. Their pictures flooded social media. Vacations, anniversaries, milestones. Each photo was a reminder of what they had taken from me, of how they had stolen my happiness and twisted it into something ugly. At first, I resented them both. But as time went on, I realized something. My anger, my hatred, it was only keeping me stuck. And I wasn't going to let them have that power over me any longer. I started focusing on what mattered. My growth, my happiness. Slowly I began to forgive, not for them but for myself. I didn't need them in my life to be whole. I was enough on my own. I found love again in a way I had never expected. I met someone who saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for everything I was. I found my peace, and in doing so I started to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost in their betrayal. But I never forgot what they had done. That's when the invitation to this event arrived. It was a high-profile gala filled with influential people from all walks of life. I knew Sarah and James would be there, their perfect little bubble still intact. But I had something they didn't know. I had built a life far beyond what they had ever imagined for me. And as I stood there face to face with Sarah at that gala, I realized just how much power I had gained over the years. Power I had taken back not by revenge but by the life I had made for myself. The night was no longer about the betrayal. It wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about showing Sarah that her victory had always been hollow, that I had always been stronger than she gave me credit for. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't just from the awkwardness of the moment. I had watched Sarah's face fall when she saw James, and I could feel the weight of the years of silence between us pressing on both of us. My heart beat faster as I stood there trying to keep my composure. The revenge I had so carefully orchestrated was finally unfolding, but in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. There was a part of me that wanted to savor this moment, to let her see the culmination of everything I had worked for, but there was something else. Something deeper, that I couldn't shake off. As I smiled at Sarah, I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. She was trying to maintain her image, her mask of perfection, but I could tell it was slipping. She had always been good at pretending everything was fine even when it wasn't. But now, standing in front of me, she was being forced to face the truth. The truth that everything she had built on the back of my broken heart was about to crumble. She had taken James from me, thinking she would always have the upper hand, thinking she had won. But I wasn't the same woman I had been when she first betrayed me. I wasn't the naive girl who believed her lies. I had become someone stronger, someone who knew what she deserved and wasn't afraid to fight for it. James, standing beside me, didn't say a word, but his presence spoke volumes. The last time I had seen him, he had been with Sarah, married to her, living the life I had dreamed of with him. I had hated him for what he had done to me. The anger I had felt in the aftermath of their betrayal had consumed me. It had taken years to move past that pain, to finally accept that I couldn't control the actions of others. But in this moment I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about hurting Sarah the way she had hurt me. It was about reclaiming my power, my happiness, and my life. And yet, as I looked at Sarah, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something else. Something I hadn't expected. I almost felt pity for her. She was standing there, her face pale, her smile strained, trying to hold on to the facade of the perfect life she had carefully constructed. But it was all an illusion. I could see the cracks in her armor. I could see that the life she had stolen from me had never truly been hers. And it wasn't just because of James. It was because she had always been a part of my life in a way that no one else had. We had shared everything, our dreams, our fears, our hopes, and she had turned it all into something ugly. But as much as I wanted to feel sorry for her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she had broken my trust in the most devastating way. She had taken everything from me. And she had done it with a smile on her face, pretending she was the victim in the story. She had convinced herself that she was entitled to James, that their love was meant to be, while I had been left behind, picking up the pieces of my shattered heart. I had spent so many years trying to forget, trying to move on, but every time I thought I had put the past behind me, something would trigger the memories. The pain would resurface, raw and unrelenting. I had tried to bury it beneath my success, beneath the new life I had built, but it was always there, lurking beneath the surface. Now, standing in front of Sarah, it was impossible to ignore. The floodgates opened and I could feel the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of her. I had spent so many years trying to figure out what I could have done differently, what I could have said to make things right. But the truth was, there was nothing I could have done. Sarah had made her choice and James had made his. And they had both chosen betrayal. The one person I thought I could trust, the one person I had always relied on, had turned her back on me when I needed her the most. And James, the man I had loved with all my heart, had walked away from me without a second thought, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. But in the midst of all the pain, something had shifted in me. I had learned to forgive, not for them but for myself. I had stopped letting their actions define who I was. I had stopped letting their betrayal control my happiness. And when I stood there looking at Sarah, I realized that I had finally let go of the anger. I had finally let go of the need for revenge. Instead of letting Sarah see the rage that had been boiling inside me for years, I gave her something else. Something she hadn't expected. I gave her the satisfaction of seeing me happy, seeing me whole. I let her see that I didn't need her or James or anyone else to define who I was. I had created a life that was mine, one that was built on my terms, not theirs. And that, in itself, was the greatest form of revenge. But the twist came when Sarah opened her mouth to speak again. Her words were laced with disbelief, but they also carried a hint of something else. Something I couldn't quite place at first. She had always been confident, but now there was something fragile in her voice. She was trying to hold on to the remnants of her perfect life, trying to salvage whatever pride she had left, but it was clear to me that it was slipping away. She wasn't just facing the fact that I had moved on. She was facing the truth that everything she had fought for, everything she had stolen, was built on a lie. "I can't believe it," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "You actually won." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just about James anymore. It was about everything. It was about the years I had spent in silence, the years I had spent trying to make sense of the betrayal, the years I had spent thinking I was the one who had lost. But in that moment I realized something important. I hadn't lost it all. I had won, not by taking something from her but by finding myself again. I smiled, a small, quiet smile that only I could understand. "No, Sarah. You lost. I found my way back." And with that I turned away, James by my side, knowing that the real victory wasn't in the past. It was in the life I was living now, a life that was mine and mine alone. As I stood there with James beside me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the years that had led to this moment. The quiet satisfaction that had settled over me when I saw the look of shock on Sarah's face began to morph into something else. Something more powerful. It was the culmination of everything I had been through, but I realized in that instant that I wasn't quite done yet. The past wasn't over for me, not until I had made sure that the life I had built was everything I deserved and more. This wasn't just about the night or about Sarah's public humiliation. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about taking the life I had lost and making it better than it ever could have been with them. The idea of revenge, of having the upper hand once again, had simmered in the back of my mind for years. It hadn't been a reckless plan of spite. It had been a well-thought-out course of action, crafted from pain, patience, and determination. From the moment Sarah and James decided they could take everything from me, I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't just going to survive their betrayal. I was going to thrive. At first, the plan had been simple: build a new life for myself, a life that wasn't defined by them or by the past. But over the years, as I grew stronger, something changed. I realized that while rebuilding my life was necessary, there was something else I needed to do to really make this mine. I needed to make sure that both Sarah and James saw what they had lost. Not just a woman they had betrayed, but the woman they could have had, the woman they underestimated. I had always been the one to step back, to let others take the lead. I had always believed that if I was just patient enough, if I just waited for the right moment, things would fall into place. But with this, I had learned that waiting wouldn't get me the justice I deserved. I had to take control. And so I did. It started with small things. I left the city I'd once shared with them behind. I had gotten used to the idea of moving forward, of building something new, but it wasn't enough. I started to work harder than ever before. My career took off in ways I hadn't expected. Every day I put everything I had into proving to myself that I didn't need them to succeed. I didn't need James or Sarah or anyone else who had ever doubted me. My work became my escape, my armor. And soon the success I had worked for started to shine through. The revenge didn't come from tearing down their lives, or trying to hurt them in the same way they had hurt me. It wasn't about sinking to their level. It was about showing them what they had forfeited by their betrayal, what they could never have again. I worked my way up higher and higher, building connections and gaining influence. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. It was about proving to myself that I could be more than what they had left me as. Then I met him. The man who would complete my plan without even knowing it. His name was Adam, and he was everything James had never been. He was confident, supportive, and most importantly, he respected me in ways I never knew I deserved. Our connection was instant. And as much as I hated to admit it, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Adam wasn't just someone who made me feel good in the moment. He was someone who saw me for who I truly was. Someone who could see through the hurt, the fear, and the doubts I had carried for so long. He understood me in a way that was beyond words. With Adam by my side, the pieces of my life started to fall into place. He encouraged me to pursue my dreams, to push past the limits I had set for myself, and to show the world what I was capable of. And in the process, something I never thought possible happened. I started to heal. The pain of betrayal was no longer at the forefront of my mind. Instead, it was replaced with hope, with the realization that the life I had built was better than anything I had imagined before. But that wasn't the end. No, the real test came when the time was right. I had spent years working towards this moment, and now it was time to make sure Sarah and James knew that they had lost everything. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It wasn't about gloating or rubbing their faces in their failure. It was about showing them that their actions had consequences. It was about showing them that they hadn't gotten away with it. And in a way, it was about showing myself that I had become something stronger than the woman they had once known. The day came when I received an invitation to the high-profile gala. A reminder of everything I had left behind, everything they had taken. Adam and I decided to attend together. He didn't know everything about my past with Sarah and James, but he knew enough to understand that this was important to me. The plan, though, wasn't just about showing up. I had orchestrated this moment from the very beginning. The details had been carefully planned. The perfect outfit, the perfect setting, and the perfect opportunity to make my presence known. I had become someone else in these years. Someone they didn't expect. I wasn't the woman who had been left behind. I wasn't the woman they thought they could walk all over. I was a woman who had risen from the ashes of their betrayal. Someone who had built a life better than they could ever imagine. As Adam and I walked into the gala, all eyes were on us. I could see Sarah in the distance, laughing and chatting with some of the other guests. And then, as if on cue, she turned and saw me. The look on her face was priceless. For the first time, she realized that her perfect life wasn't as perfect as she had made it seem. That she wasn't the one in control anymore. That I had taken back my life and I was living it in a way that she could never replicate. But it wasn't just about the look on her face. It was about the fact that, in that moment, I knew I had done something for myself. Something I could be proud of. Sarah's perfect world wasn't perfect anymore. It had crumbled under the weight of her own actions. And as the night wore on, I realized something important. I didn't need Sarah to understand my revenge. I didn't need her to apologize or make amends. What mattered was that I had come full circle. I had turned the pain they caused me into something far more powerful than anything they could have ever imagined. Revenge wasn't just about getting back at them. It was about taking control of my own story, of my own destiny, and showing the world that I was more than just a victim of their betrayal. I was the woman who rose above it all. The moment Sarah's eyes locked with mine, I could feel the air between us shift. It was more than just a recognition of the woman who had once been my best friend. It was a recognition of everything she had taken from me. But now, standing in the same high-profile venue with my life completely transformed, I realized I didn't need to say a word. She had already realized the truth. As we exchanged glances, her face paled, her confidence shattered. She had spent so many years pretending she had everything she wanted, the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect facade. But it had all been built on lies, and now it was crumbling. She could see it in my eyes. The quiet satisfaction of knowing I had rebuilt myself into someone she would never understand. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to make her feel smaller than she already did. What I had wanted from the very beginning, was to show her that I had not only survived her betrayal, I had thrived in spite of it. I had built something far more valuable than her hollow perfection. And she could see it in me, in the way I stood tall, in the way my smile felt more genuine than hers ever could. Adam stood beside me, a silent presence that spoke volumes. He didn't need to understand the full history between me and Sarah. He didn't need to know every detail of the betrayal. He was here for me, and that was all that mattered. But I could see that even he noticed the shift in the atmosphere. He leaned in slightly, his voice low but reassuring. "You okay?" I nodded, more for myself than for him. "I'm more than okay." The words left my lips with such ease, such certainty, that I almost surprised myself. But I wasn't lying. I had finally found peace. Not in revenge, not in hurting Sarah or James, but in my own strength, in the life I had created for myself. Sarah, on the other hand, was visibly struggling. She was doing her best to regain her composure, but it was evident that she couldn't handle the situation. Her carefully constructed mask was slipping, and she didn't know how to fix it. She had always been the one in control. The one who had everything she ever wanted, the one who always got what she desired. But now, standing before me, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. I was. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "I never thought you'd actually make it out of this. I thought you'd crumble." The words stung, but not because they were true. No, they stung because they reminded me of the time when I had believed that very same thing. I had thought I wouldn't be able to survive their betrayal, that the pain would break me beyond repair. But here I was, standing stronger than ever, having turned that pain into something far more powerful. I smiled softly, shaking my head. "You don't know me as well as you thought." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. They were the culmination of everything I had worked for, everything I had fought through. And in that moment, I realized that the best revenge wasn't in destroying Sarah. It was in showing her that I had found my own happiness, my own strength without needing her or anyone else to validate it. James had been standing a few feet away, observing the exchange, his expression unreadable. I hadn't expected him to step in to say anything. But then, just as the tension reached its peak, he took a step forward. His voice, calm and steady, broke through the silence. "Sarah, this isn't what you thought it was. We both know that." For a split second it felt like time had stopped. Sarah's face twisted with disbelief, and I could almost feel her entire world crashing down. She had always thought she had won, thought that by marrying James she had somehow defeated me. But now, in this moment, the truth couldn't be denied. She hadn't won anything. She had merely taken the easy path, the one where she manipulated and deceived to get what she wanted. But I had earned my happiness. I had fought for it. And that was what made all the difference. "James, you don't mean that," she stammered, her voice cracking. Her eyes were wide with panic, like a cornered animal trying to make sense of the situation. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The veil of perfection she had wrapped herself in for all these years was ripped away in an instant. James sighed, his gaze turning to me, then back to her. "I thought I wanted this life with you, but I was wrong, Sarah. I was wrong to think it could replace what I had with her. What we had." His words were soft, but they carried an undeniable truth. He had made his choice, and it hadn't been Sarah. It hadn't been the easy road, the one that had come with deception and betrayal. No, his heart, even after all these years, had never truly belonged to anyone but me. Sarah's eyes flicked between us, the realization dawning on her face like a heavy weight. It wasn't just me who had moved on. James had too. And no matter how much she tried to salvage the wreckage of their marriage, it wasn't going to happen. They weren't the power couple she had always imagined herself to be. They weren't the perfect pair. They were just two people who had built a life on lies, and now that life was unraveling. She turned on her heel, tears welling up in her eyes, but there was no sympathy in my heart for her. I had long ago stopped feeling sorry for her. What she had done was unforgivable, and the truth was that she had made her own bed. I had no desire to be a part of her story anymore, and I was finally free from the shackles of the past that had once bound me to her. As Sarah hurriedly walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure wash over me. It wasn't the kind of closure I had once imagined, where she would beg for forgiveness or apologize for everything she had taken from me. No, this was different. This was about me taking control of my own narrative, about me standing tall and showing the world that I was more than the woman they had tried to break. I looked at Adam and he smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've come so far." I nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. I had done it. Not just for myself, but for the person I had once been. The woman who had believed she could never recover. I had proven her wrong. And as the night drew to a close, I realized that the real victory wasn't in what Sarah had lost. It was in everything I had gained. The peace, the happiness, and the strength that had always been inside me. It had never been about revenge. It had always been about reclaiming my life, my power, and my happiness. And in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all. The evening faded slowly into the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside me. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. As the gala came to a close, I stood in the center of the room, still processing everything that had just unfolded. The events of the evening felt surreal. What started as a night of rekindling old flames of anger and betrayal had ended with me standing victorious. Not in the way I had once imagined, but in a way that felt far more satisfying. James and I walked out of the venue together, and for the first time in years I felt like we were walking on the same path again. But this time it was different. There was no cloud of doubt hanging over us. There was no unfinished business to tie up. There was only a shared understanding, an unspoken connection that we had never truly lost, even after all the years apart. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, there were no more questions between us. No more wondering what could have been. It was finally done. "Are you happy?" I asked him, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I was almost afraid of the answer, of what he might say, but I needed to know. This wasn't about Sarah or about revenge. This was about us. About whether we had a future beyond the shadows of our past. James smiled softly, a look of understanding in his eyes. "I am now," he said quietly. "I didn't know what I had until I lost it, and now that I've found it again, I'm not letting it slip away. There was something in his voice, something genuine, that made me realize how far we had both come. We had both carried the weight of our choices for so long, but now it was time to move forward. Together if we chose to. It was a strange comfort knowing that the past had been put to rest, not with anger or animosity, but with a shared recognition of what truly mattered. The drive home was quiet, each of us reflecting on the night, on everything that had led up to this moment. When we finally arrived at my apartment, I stepped out of the car, but something made me pause. I turned back to James, who was still sitting in the car, his eyes on me with a look that I couldn't quite place. "Are you sure you want this?" I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure this is what you want?" James looked at me, a thoughtful expression crossing his face before he nodded slowly. "I never stopped wanting this. I was just too afraid to admit it." And with that we both knew. It wasn't about the mistakes we had made, the years that had slipped away. It wasn't about the betrayal, the hurt, or the broken trust. It was about understanding that sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find what we truly need. And sometimes it's not until everything falls apart that we realize what we've been searching for all along. The next few days passed by in a blur, but something had changed in me. It wasn't just the closure I had hoped for. It was the sense of freedom that came with it. I had let go of the bitterness that had once consumed me. I had let go of the need for revenge, of the desire to prove to Sarah that I had won. Instead, I was focusing on the life I was building with James, on the love that had survived despite everything. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't help but think of Sarah. The look on her face that night, the disbelief that she had tried so hard to conceal. It haunted me. In a way, I almost pitied her. She had spent so much of her life trying to be perfect, trying to outshine everyone around her, trying to prove that she was better than me. But in the end, it wasn't her perfect marriage or her carefully curated life that mattered. It was the truth that she had lost, and no amount of money, success, or fake smiles could change that. As time went on, I realized that I no longer needed to worry about Sarah or her life. She had made her choices and I had made mine. It was time to let her go, just as I had let go of the pain. The best revenge wasn't in watching her suffer or in making her feel the same way I had. The best revenge was in living my life, in being happy, in creating a future that was mine. The best revenge was in showing her that I didn't need her approval or her validation to be whole. One evening, a few weeks after the gala, I received a message from Sarah. It was short, but it carried an apology I never expected. She told me she had been wrong, that she had realized the damage she had caused, and that she was truly sorry. For a moment I felt a pang of sadness, but then I realized something important. Her apology didn't change anything. I didn't need it. I had already forgiven her long before that message arrived. Not for her, but for me. Forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about releasing myself from the chains of anger and resentment that had bound me for so long. I took a deep breath and put the phone down. The message was a step forward for her, and for that I was glad. But I had moved on. I had everything I needed in my life now. I didn't need her apology to find peace. I had already found it. The days continued to pass, each one bringing new opportunities, new beginnings. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of. A life that was mine and mine alone. I no longer worried about the past, about Sarah, or about the pain they had caused. I was free. I was whole. And in the end, that was the most powerful revenge of all. As I sat on the balcony one evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something else. This wasn't just about the closure I had longed for. It was about the future I had reclaimed for myself, a future that was full of possibilities. A future that was no longer defined by the past, but by the strength and resilience I had found in myself. And as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I knew that my story was just beginning. He cheated on me with my best friend, so I took revenge by burning his world down, sleeping with his closest friend. Now he can't stand seeing us happy together. After shattering his world, I'll divorce him. I had never thought that my life could be so perfect. Joshua and I, Melissa, had been married for a year and a half. In those first few months, everything felt like a dream. Smooth, predictable, and filled with a warmth I thought was forever. The kind of warmth where you never question the stability of your relationship because it just feels right. We had no children yet, but we often talked about our future. I thought we were building something solid, a foundation for a life that would last. What could go wrong when everything seemed so perfect? But somehow perfect isn't always as it seems. That was something I would soon learn, and the moment I realized it shattered everything I had known to be true. Before we dive into the story, I just want to take a moment to thank you all for being part of this journey. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free and it helps us continue to build this amazing community. After watching the story, write in the comments what you think. Was the wife's revenge justified, or did it just make things worse? Let me know what you would do in this situation. Let's dive in. I trusted Joshua completely. He was my husband after all. We had been inseparable for the longest time. I had no reason to doubt him. It wasn't just that we were married, he was my best friend, the one I laughed with, cried with, and built a life with. No matter how hard I try now, I can't even remember a time I questioned his loyalty. He was my rock. We had a home, a shared life, and our friends adored us. Everything was simple, easy, and fulfilling. There was, however, one person who had been in and out of our home just as much as Joshua and I. My best friend, Amira. She was more than a friend to me, she was like family. I trusted her with my heart and soul just as I did Joshua. She knew everything about me, my fears, my hopes, the way I thought about the future. Our friendship had been strong since childhood, and I never once doubted that it would change. What could possibly go wrong when I had two people I believed in the most? It was a day like any other, or at least it seemed so. I was sitting at home, scrolling through my phone when I received an unexpected message. It wasn't from Joshua. It wasn't from Amira either. It was from a woman I didn't know, but her message sent an icy chill down my spine. I think you need to know something about your husband. I sat there, frozen for what felt like hours, my eyes glued to the screen, but the words wouldn't quite sink in. Who was this person? Why was she contacting me? And why was she insinuating something about Joshua? The message continued. I saw him with a woman at the office last week. They seemed very close, if you know what I mean. I could feel my heart racing as the reality of the words began to set in. I closed my eyes trying to process it, but all I could do was stare blankly at the screen. No, it couldn't be true. Joshua would never do that. But doubt had begun to creep in, and once doubt takes hold, it grows like a weed, choking everything it touches. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, a jealous colleague trying to create trouble. But something deep inside me, the kind of instinct that comes from truly knowing someone, whispered that there was something more to this. The problem was, I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. A part of me wanted to simply ignore it. Let it go. I was angry at this woman for sending me such a message, and I even thought about blocking her. But another part of me, one I didn't want to admit existed, started to wonder if there was some truth behind it. I dismissed it though. After all, why would Joshua cheat on me? I knew him too well. We had a life together. He loved me. Yet that lingering thought didn't fade. It grew louder in my mind, gnawing at me. What if it were true? What if my perfect life wasn't so perfect? I tried to push it aside, but it consumed me. The next day I found myself unable to focus at work, replaying that message in my head over and over again. And then, just as if life had conspired to show me the truth, something unexpected happened. Amira invited me to lunch. She was her usual bubbly self, full of life and laughter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her eyes avoided mine more than usual. She seemed distracted. She kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, tapping on it as if something else was on her mind. That day I was restless. The messages, the suspicion, they were taking over my thoughts. I tried to focus on the conversation with Amira, but my mind wandered, imagining things that hadn't happened. Until one moment she said something that completely shattered the illusion of normalcy. I think Joshua's been spending more time with someone at the office, she casually mentioned, almost as if it were an afterthought. I froze. The blood drained from my face. I couldn't breathe. I had heard those words before in that message, but hearing them come from Amira's lips felt like a slap in the face. She didn't notice my reaction, but I felt everything shift in that moment. Why would she say that? I asked myself. My mind screamed in confusion, panic. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean? I asked, my heart racing, every word heavy in the air. Amira shrugged, not meeting my gaze. I don't know. Just something I overheard. A woman came into the office while you were away last week. She was pretty close to him. She let the sentence hang in the air as if that alone should be enough to explain everything. Something clicked in my mind. My pulse quickened. That woman, that message, it wasn't a mistake. It was real. Joshua had been seeing someone. My hands started shaking. I barely heard the rest of Amira's words. I excused myself, suddenly needing space to breathe. As I walked away from the table, all I could think was, could it be her? Could it really be her? The one person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. I needed answers. And I needed them now. But I didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to confront the one person who had always been by my side. I had to find out the truth no matter what it cost me. I didn't know what to think, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that had settled deep in my stomach. Walking away from Amira at lunch, I felt like I was stepping into a storm, unsure whether I would be struck by lightning or drowned by rain. My mind raced with questions, none of them ones I wanted to answer. Could Joshua really be involved with someone else? Could my best friend be part of it? I tried to push it all aside, but the doubt was like a vine, spreading, choking, suffocating the life out of the peace I had once felt. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind unable to focus on anything else. My work, conversations with friends, even simple tasks. Everything was clouded by suspicion. Joshua's smile, the one that used to comfort me, now felt like an enigma. I kept replaying every little detail of our life together, trying to find something that would explain this unsettling feeling. But no matter how hard I searched, nothing seemed to fit. I should have confronted him right then and there. But part of me, the part that still wanted to believe, told me I needed more than just whispers and offhand comments. I needed to know the truth, the full truth, before I could accuse anyone. So, I did what I had never done before. I kept my suspicions to myself and let them grow in silence. The more I let them fester, the clearer it became that I couldn't live with this doubt hanging over me. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to breathe through the knot of anxiety that twisted in my chest. I didn't know what was worse, the idea of confronting Joshua or the thought that I might already know the truth. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger with tired eyes and a face that had aged in just a few days. I hardly recognized myself anymore. The nagging thought grew louder. What if he's really doing this? What if she's someone I trust? I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Joshua and I had always been honest with each other, or so I thought. But honesty, it seemed, was a fragile thing. And I had started to doubt whether he ever truly understood what it meant to me. That night, I decided I needed to know. I couldn't go on like this, suspicion poisoning every part of me. The thought of confronting Joshua face to face, though, was unbearable. So, I took the only option I felt I had left. I contacted the woman who had messaged me. The one who had stirred this whirlwind of doubt in the first place. I had no idea what to expect. Part of me feared that she was just a troublemaker, trying to tear down a happy marriage for no reason. But a much larger part of me hoped, almost desperately, that she would confirm the truth and free me from the pain of guessing. I sent her a message late that night. I could barely bring myself to type it, the words feeling foreign on the screen, but I knew I had to ask. I need to know everything. Who's he with? When did this happen? The response came quicker than I expected. My heart hammered in my chest as I read her words. It's not just anyone. I'm sorry, Melissa, but it's your best friend. She's been seeing him for a while now. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you deserve to know. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. The room spun around me, the edges of my vision blurring. The message was short, blunt, and undeniable. My best friend. It was like a punch to the gut, the air in my lungs vanishing. I wanted to cry, scream, do anything to release the intense surge of anger and hurt that gripped me. But all I could do was sit there, paralyzed, clutching my phone like a lifeline. It didn't seem real. The words blurred together as if my brain couldn't process the enormity of what was happening. Amira, my best friend, with my husband. I threw the phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the wall barely registering. My mind couldn't focus. How had I missed it? How had I not seen the signs? The late-night phone calls, the stolen glances. Those were things I'd brushed off as nothing. I'd trusted her more than anyone. I had called her my sister, someone I could confide in no matter what. And now she had turned her back on me in the worst way possible. For the next few days, I felt like a shell of the person I had once been. Every time I saw Joshua, I felt a mixture of rage and confusion bubble up inside me. His smile, the way he would touch my arm as if nothing had changed, it made me want to scream. How could he act so normal? Didn't he know that everything between us had already been broken? But I couldn't confront him yet. Part of me still hoped this was all some cruel misunderstanding, some sick joke. But as the days passed, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I already knew the truth. My stomach twisted into knots as I thought about confronting him. What could I even say? What words could possibly capture the pain I felt in that moment? Then a strange thing happened. The doubt, which had been creeping like an insidious shadow, suddenly took root. I no longer felt like I was questioning things. I knew. I knew that my best friend had betrayed me, that Joshua had betrayed me, and that my life had been nothing but a lie all along. I decided it was time to face the truth no matter how much it hurt. The night I chose to confront Joshua was one of the hardest nights of my life. I could feel the anger building inside me, but there was also a fear deep down that I couldn't quite shake. What if he denied it? What if he tried to twist things around and make me doubt my own feelings? But I knew I couldn't let him manipulate me again. This time I would demand the truth. Joshua came home late as usual. He didn't seem to notice the tension in the air, the way my hands trembled as I set the table for dinner. He smiled at me, his usual grin, warm, confident. The same smile that had once made me feel safe. But now it felt like a mask. I stood there, frozen for a moment before I spoke. "Joshua," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know." He looked at me, his expression shifting slightly. "Know what?" "Everything. About you and Amira." His face paled. For a second he didn't say anything. I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized I wasn't playing around. "Melissa, please," he started, but I cut him off. "No. Don't. Just tell me the truth." Joshua's face turned ashen the moment I spoke. The silence between us was thick, hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. His mouth opened and closed as if he were trying to find the right words, but they wouldn't come. I could see it. The guilt, the fear, the realization that the truth had finally caught up with him. The man I once trusted with every piece of my heart was now standing in front of me, exposed. And I had no intention of making it easy for him to escape. "Melissa, please." His voice trembled, and for a moment I almost felt pity. Almost. But it quickly vanished. "You don't get to ask for my pity, Joshua." "Not after everything," I said, my voice steady, though it trembled with the weight of everything I was feeling. His eyes flickered with shame, and then slowly his gaze dropped to the floor. There was no defense left for him. He couldn't look me in the eye. I could see the weight of the lies settling heavily on him, crushing him in ways I hadn't thought possible. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. "Tell me the truth," I pressed, the words a demand, not a plea. "You and Amira. How long?" The room seemed to shrink as the words settled in. Joshua shifted uncomfortably, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture that had always been a signal of his discomfort. But there was no comfort now. There was only the stark reality of what he had done, and the terrible toll it was about to take on everything we had. His voice cracked, but he still didn't look at me. "It started a few months ago. It was never meant to be this way." "Never meant to be what, Joshua?" I asked, my voice rising now. "Never meant to betray me? Never meant to sleep with my best friend behind my back?" The words were like daggers, cutting deeper with each one I spoke. I could feel the fury inside me rising, coiling tighter, but I refused to let it completely consume me. I needed answers, not a release of my rage. As much as I wanted to scream, I had to hear him say it. I had to understand how deeply he had lied to me. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said finally, his words coming out in a hushed, strained voice. "It just happened. One thing led to another. It wasn't supposed to go this far." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, but I stifled it. Wasn't supposed to go this far? I had no sympathy for him anymore. This wasn't some accident. It was a deliberate choice, a betrayal. And Amira, she had been there helping him destroy everything we had worked for. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "No, Joshua. Don't you dare try to spin this as some mistake. You chose this. Every time you lied to me, every time you touched her, you made a choice." He stood there, his head hung in shame, but it wasn't enough. Nothing he said could undo the damage that had already been done. The truth was clear now. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had given him everything. And he had shattered it. "I'm sorry, Melissa," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I don't know what came over me. It wasn't about you, it was about me and Amira and—" I shook my head, cutting him off before he could continue his pathetic excuses. "No. Don't you dare make this about you. You're the one who chose to betray me. You're the one who thought it was okay to lie to my face day after day. You're the one who chose to make her a part of this. The reality of it all started to sink in deeper. He wasn't just some stranger who had hurt me. He was the man I had trusted with my life, my hopes and my dreams. I thought we were building something together, something unbreakable. But now all of that was gone. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would betray someone like this, Joshua said, his voice barely audible now. But I did, and I can't take it back. I can't undo the hurt I've caused you. His words sounded hollow to me, like echoes in an empty room. I had heard enough of his excuses. I had heard enough of the remorse that didn't change anything. I needed him to see how much he had taken from me, how much he had stolen. I can't even look at you right now, I muttered, the bitterness in my tone unmistakable. My heart ached with the weight of it all, but I knew I had to be strong. I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in this lie any longer. He took a tentative step toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. No. Don't come any closer. I was trembling now, not with anger but with a deep, searing hurt. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe she did this. Joshua's face crumpled with guilt. I know. I've ruined everything. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Just give me a chance. You've already had your chance, Joshua, I said, my voice quiet now but firm. And you wasted it. You've betrayed me in the worst way possible. His head sank even lower. I could hear the quiet desperation in his voice, but it didn't change what had already happened. Nothing would. I'll never forgive you for this, I whispered, though the words felt like daggers in my own heart. But it was the truth. I had to accept it. This was no longer a marriage. It was a betrayal that couldn't be fixed. And I'll never forgive her either. Joshua's eyes widened, and I could see the realization hit him hard. He had lost me, and there was no coming back from this. I don't know how to fix this, he murmured, his voice thick with regret. But it was too late. The damage had already been done, and no apology in the world could undo what had been broken. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that Joshua and I had reached an irreversible point. The person I had loved, the person I had trusted, was gone. What was left was someone who had shattered everything we had built. And I couldn't live with that. I turned away from him then, unable to face him any longer. I didn't want to hear his apologies. I didn't want to listen to any more of his excuses. There was nothing left to say. I was done. As I walked away, I felt a cold sense of finality settle over me. I had been broken, but I would rebuild. I would find myself again, despite the pieces Joshua had scattered across the floor. And one day I would move on. But for now, there was only silence. And that silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The silence that filled the space between Joshua and me was suffocating. As I walked away from him, each step felt like a decision, one I couldn't undo. I could feel the weight of everything crashing down, the life I thought I knew, the future I had envisioned, all crumbling into pieces. I couldn't look at him anymore, not with the same love, not with the same trust. He had shattered everything in an instant. I walked into the next room, the tension still clinging to me. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I needed space, more than I had ever needed it before. The shock hadn't worn off yet, but there was something else rising inside me, something I wasn't sure how to name. It was anger. It was betrayal. But above all, it was a deep sense of emptiness. How could he have done this? How could I have been so blind? My best friend. My husband. All of it felt like a cruel joke, one I wasn't laughing at. I took a deep breath and ran my hands through my hair. I needed to think, but I couldn't focus. The pain was too raw. I glanced over at my phone lying on the counter, a reminder of everything that had been exposed. And then something inside me shifted. What if there was a way to make him feel the hurt I was carrying? What if I could make him understand, truly understand, the destruction he had caused? My heart was already broken, but there was a part of me deep down that wanted more than just his regret. I wanted him to feel the weight of this. I wanted him to know that his actions would come with consequences. I didn't want to lose myself in anger, but I couldn't pretend I wasn't angry. No matter how many times he apologized, no matter how broken he seemed, he had crossed a line that I could never ignore. He had humiliated me. He had betrayed me. And there was only one way to make him understand. I needed a plan. The idea that flickered in my mind wasn't born from some fleeting emotion. It was a cold, calculated reaction to the pain I had been forced to bear. A part of me felt justified. He had his fun with my best friend. Why shouldn't I do the same? But deep down I knew this wouldn't bring me peace. It wouldn't fix what had been broken. But I wasn't interested in fixing things anymore. I just wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to see what it felt like. So, I did what anyone in my position might do. I reached out to his closest friend, the one who had been with him through thick and thin, the one who had always treated me with kindness. His name was Ben. He was different from Joshua. More grounded, less flashy. And in a strange way, he reminded me of the man Joshua used to be before everything fell apart. I called Ben under the guise of wanting to talk about work. There was no need to make him suspicious. He agreed to meet me later that evening. When we sat down at the restaurant, a place Joshua and I used to frequent, I couldn't help but feel a sick sense of satisfaction. I had planned this and now it was happening. Ben greeted me warmly, his smile genuine. We exchanged pleasantries, but beneath the surface I was consumed by the plan. The more we talked, the more my nerves settled. This wasn't about Ben. It was about Joshua. About making him see me for once not as his wife, not as his victim, but as a woman capable of making her own decisions. "What's going on, Melissa? You've seemed off lately. Everything all right?" Ben asked, his eyes filled with concern. I smiled, softly at first, then more confidently. "It's complicated. I'm just trying to figure out a few things." "Anything I can help with?" he asked, leaning forward, his gaze steady. I looked at him for a moment and then the decision came. I had to do this. I had to show Joshua in the most direct way possible the consequences of his actions. Ben, to my surprise, was receptive. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but I certainly hadn't anticipated him agreeing so easily to spend the evening together. Before long, I could see the shift in Ben's demeanor. He wasn't just being kind, he was intrigued, drawn into the moment in a way that felt strangely empowering. It wasn't a perfect plan, and deep down I knew this wasn't the solution to my pain. But in that moment, it was the only thing I could control. We shared a few drinks and I leaned in closer. The tension between us built and I could feel a sick satisfaction bubbling inside me. He didn't resist. He didn't pull away. And just like that, it happened. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had made a mistake. One I wasn't sure I could undo. It wasn't the regret of my actions that hit me first, though. It was the realization that I had crossed another line. That sick satisfaction I had felt the night before was replaced by emptiness. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't going to fix anything. If anything, it was just another complication I had created for myself. But there was no turning back now. I had done it. I had hurt him, not in the way I thought would heal me, but in a way that would force him to finally feel something. And then the phone call came. Joshua's voice on the other end was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. His words were rushed, desperate. I know what you did." His voice cracked. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to hurt me like this." I swallowed, the knot in my throat tightening. "I'm not the one who hurt us, Joshua," I said, my voice calm but cold. "You did that. You made this happen." He fell silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "I've been such a fool, Melissa. I never should have done any of it. Please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. You've already done it, Joshua. It's too late for apologies." I paused, feeling the weight of every word I was saying. "I'm done." The line went dead, and I realized then that I wasn't doing this to get him back. I was doing this to reclaim my power. To remind myself that I could still make decisions, still take control. In the end, I didn't need him to regret anything. I needed to move on. But the damage had been done and there was no going back now. The call ended abruptly, leaving the sharp silence in its wake. I held my phone in my hand for a long time, staring at the screen, my thoughts tangled in the chaos of what had just happened. Joshua's voice echoed in my ears. "Don't do this. Don't hurt me like this." But it wasn't just about him anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I set the phone down slowly, my fingers trembling as I tried to make sense of the mess I had created. The anger, the hurt, the revenge. It had all spiraled into something I couldn't control. In a twisted way, I had thought hurting him would somehow make me feel better. I had wanted him to understand, to feel the pain I had endured. But now, standing in the aftermath, I wasn't so sure. It wasn't the revenge that was eating away at me. It was the reality that we had reached a point of no return. Nothing I did, no matter how much I tried to force him to feel my pain, would change what had been broken. What had been ruined. I had felt hollow for so long, but this emptiness felt even more suffocating. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. There I was, Just a woman who had been betrayed by the man she loved, trying to find her way through the mess he had made. The woman who had once believed in the strength of her marriage. The woman who had fought for something real. But that woman was fading, disappearing in the wake of what had happened. I knew what I had to do. The decision that had been brewing deep inside me was finally clear. Divorce. It was time to let go. But the thought of saying those words, of finally admitting to myself that the life I had fought for was over, felt like a heavy weight on my chest. But what was the alternative? To stay? To pretend? To keep playing this game where we both pretended that nothing had changed? I had asked for honesty, for trust, and he had betrayed me with my best friend. There was no fixing it. No rebuilding it. This marriage was a facade, a broken promise, and I was tired of pretending otherwise. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Joshua. It had been hours since our conversation, but his desperation hadn't dulled. I don't want to lose you, Melissa. Please. I'll do anything to make things right. The words stared back at me, hollow and empty. How could he think I'd fall for that? How could he possibly think that anything he said now could change what had already happened? I had given him my trust, my loyalty, and in return he had shattered everything. What was left for us now? What was left for me? I felt a strange calm wash over me as I picked up the phone. My hands were no longer shaking. The decision had been made. This was the end. There was no going back. I dialed his number, the ringing filling the silence of my apartment. He picked up on the second ring, his voice crackling with emotion. Melissa, please just let me explain. I know I messed up, but I don't want to hear it anymore, I interrupted, my voice steady. There's nothing left to say. I'm done. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the shock in his silence. His voice returned, softer now, filled with a sense of disbelief. Melissa, please. Don't do this. I love you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I can't lose you. I swallowed hard, forcing the words to come. You already lost me, Joshua. You lost me the moment you decided to betray me. I took a deep breath. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me. I can't stay with someone who has broken me in ways I never thought possible. I'm done. I want a divorce. His voice cracked, but he didn't speak for a while. I could hear him breathing heavily, his emotions raw, but I refused to give in to the guilt creeping up my throat. This wasn't about guilt. This was about what I deserved. This was about finding my own peace no matter how painful it was. Melissa, please. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance, he begged. I closed my eyes, the tears I had been holding back finally beginning to surface. But I didn't let them fall. I couldn't let them fall, not now. It's too late for that, Joshua. You've had your chances. And you chose her. You chose the lies, the betrayal. I can't forget that. I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me, but I was resolute. This was the end. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. You've destroyed everything we had, I said, the finality of the words hanging in the air. And now it's time to move on. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear his breath, shallow and uneven, but there was nothing left for him to say. He couldn't fix this. He couldn't undo the damage. The trust was gone. The love was gone. Everything we had built together was gone, and no apology, no promise, no tears would change that. I'll have the papers sent to you, I said, my voice firm. You'll get them soon. I hope you find what you're looking for with her. But I'm done. With that, I ended the call, the weight of the moment sinking into my bones. The finality of it was overwhelming. I had chosen this path. I had chosen to take control of my life again. And though the pain was raw, though the hurt was still there, I knew I was doing the right thing. The divorce wasn't about punishing him. It was about freeing myself. Freeing myself from the lies, the betrayal, the hurt. Freeing myself from the man I thought I knew, the man I had trusted with my heart. I took a deep breath, standing in the quiet of my apartment, the walls that had once witnessed my laughter now heavy with the echoes of my sorrow. But even in the quiet, even in the emptiness, there was something else. A spark of hope. A tiny flicker that, despite everything, I would rebuild. I would heal. And this time I would do it for myself. Joshua had made his choice. And now I was making mine. The days following the call felt like a blur, an unsettling quiet settling over my life. It was as if the world had paused, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I hadn't seen Joshua in person since that conversation, but I could feel his presence everywhere. It was like a shadow hanging over me, one I couldn't escape. I'd taken the step to end things, but now I was left to deal with the aftermath. The divorce papers came through quickly, just as I expected. It was a formality, really. The legal part didn't change anything about how I felt. Empty but free. Still, as I signed my name on those papers, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel the weight of it. This was final. There was no going back. We were done. What came next was both expected and surprising in its intensity. Joshua's obsession. It started subtly with messages. A string of texts, each one more desperate than the last. I miss you. Please let's talk. I made a mistake. I'll change. I swear I will. I ignored every single one. But that didn't stop him. I'd wake up to a new message every morning, his words a reminder of the life I was trying to leave behind. I found myself staring at my phone, my fingers itching to reply, but I stopped myself every time. I couldn't give in. Not now. Days passed, then weeks. His messages became more erratic. He started calling, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Please, Melissa, you have to believe me. I'm sorry. I need you. It was like he was trying to reel me back in with each desperate plea. The man who once seemed so confident, so sure of himself, now sounded like a broken version of the person I had married. But the more he tried to contact me, the more I realized something. His obsession was not about love. It wasn't about wanting me back. It was about control. He couldn't stand the thought of losing me, not because of what we shared, but because it was a blow to his ego. I could feel my strength building each time I resisted. Each time I ignored him, each time I rejected his attempts to draw me back into his orbit, I felt more in control of my own life. It was empowering, yet it was exhausting. The emotional toll of having to shut him out, of constantly battling his persistence, was draining, but I wasn't going to let him wear me down. One day, after a particularly long stretch of silence, he showed up at my door. I had just finished my morning coffee when I heard the knock. I froze, unsure of what to expect. My heart raced, but I steeled myself, telling myself that I could handle this. I was done with him, but he didn't seem to understand that. When I opened the door, there he was, Joshua, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, his face a mixture of desperation and sorrow. I stood there, taking in the sight of him. He looked like a man who had lost everything, and in many ways he had. But I wasn't going to let myself be manipulated again. Melissa, he whispered, his voice cracked. Please just listen. I need you to hear me out. I know I screwed up. I can't live with myself knowing that I lost you. I can't let you go. I stepped back, shaking my head. Joshua, I don't need you to explain. You've had your chances and you threw them away. I'm not your second chance. I'm not your backup plan. I'm done. His face twisted with anguish. You don't understand. I can't lose you. I love you. I wanted to shout at him, to tell him that love wasn't enough. That love didn't excuse betrayal, that love didn't erase the pain he had caused. But instead I stood there, silent, letting the weight of his words wash over me. I'm not the same person anymore, I said, my voice low but firm. And neither are you. The man I loved is gone, and what's left is someone who doesn't respect me. Someone who doesn't deserve me. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. I'm not the woman you knew, Joshua. I'm stronger now. I've learned that I deserve better than this. His face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered everything. His betrayal, the lies, the way he had torn apart my life without even thinking twice. And that sadness for him quickly faded into something else. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice small now. You didn't want to hurt me? I laughed, though it didn't feel like a laugh. You've done nothing but hurt me. And the worst part? You're still trying to make it about you. You're still trying to pull me back into your mess. He took a step forward, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't, I said, my voice sharp now. You don't get to come in here and make me feel guilty. I'm not your punching bag. I'm not your emotional crutch. You broke this, Joshua. And now you need to deal with the consequences. For a long time he didn't say anything. His shoulders slumped and he looked defeated. But I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I didn't feel anything for him except a quiet resolve. I think it's time for you to leave, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. I've given you enough of my life. I'm taking it back. He looked like he was about to argue, but he didn't. Instead he turned and walked away, leaving me standing at the door, feeling a strange sense of finality. The door clicked shut behind him and I stood there, the silence filling the space. It wasn't relief I felt. It wasn't peace. It was something else. A mixture of strength and sadness, of knowing that I had finally, truly taken control of my life. This was my moment. Joshua might have tried to keep me in his world, but I was done with that world. I had built my own, and in that world I was free. Free from the lies, free from the pain, and free from him. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight in my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. It was a long road ahead, but I was ready for it. This was the beginning of my life. Not with him, but without him. And for the first time in a long while I felt hope. After closing the door behind Joshua, I stood still for a moment as if waiting for something to happen. The emptiness of the room seemed to press in on me, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a crushing weight. It was a space, an open canvas where I could start over, where I could finally breathe without the burden of his presence hanging over me. I slowly turned away from the door and walked across the room, feeling the faintest sense of freedom. My apartment, once a place where memories of him and the life we had built lingered in every corner, now felt like my own. My hands shook not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the decision I had made. For the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I had surfaced. I didn't know where to start. How could I begin again after everything? But the thought of it didn't seem so daunting anymore. The weight of the betrayal, the pain, and the suffocating guilt that had held me hostage for months was lifting. It wasn't gone completely, but it was retreating bit by bit, leaving behind a glimmer of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a long time: hope. I sank into the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The silence in my apartment was deafening, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. This was my space, my sanctuary, and it was time to make it truly mine again. I let the days stretch out before me, taking each one at a time. The first few were filled with a sort of numbness, as if my body had yet to catch up with my mind. But soon I found myself returning to things I had put on hold. Small things like cooking a meal I liked, reading a book I had forgotten about, or going for long walks without the constant worry about what Joshua was doing or saying. I rediscovered pieces of myself that I had lost along the way. Then there were the moments of reflection. Moments when the memories of what had happened with Joshua would sneak up on me. The betrayal, the heartache, the lies. But instead of feeling consumed by those memories, I allowed myself to feel them without letting them define me. I understood now that those moments were just chapters in my life, but they didn't have to be the whole story. One afternoon I walked past the small cafe I used to visit with Joshua. I hesitated for a moment, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. But then I smiled. I stepped inside, ordering a coffee just the way I used to. It felt like a small victory, something so simple yet so significant. I could enjoy my life without the shadow of betrayal looming over it. I wasn't his anymore, and I didn't need him to validate me. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the anger I had felt began to soften. It was still there, lingering, but it no longer consumed me. I realized I didn't need to hate Joshua to heal. I didn't need to hold on to the pain to move on. It wasn't about erasing what had happened, but about accepting it, learning from it, and using it to grow stronger. But growth wasn't always linear. There were days when I still found myself questioning my choices. Was I too harsh? Had I been too quick to close the door on everything we had? But then I would remind myself of the truth. No one else could define my worth but me. I had chosen to stand up for myself, to break free from the lies and manipulation. And in doing so I had reclaimed my power. One evening, as I sat in my apartment looking out the window at the city lights, I realized how far I had come. The woman I had been, the one who had once believed in Joshua, in their love, in their future, felt like a distant memory. I was different now. Stronger. More resilient. I had rebuilt my world, brick by brick, and I was finally starting to believe that it was enough. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I stood, my heart momentarily skipping a beat before walking to the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see my friend Rachel standing there, her face lighting up when she saw me. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said with a playful grin. "I thought we could grab dinner and catch up. Just us girls." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "That sounds perfect." As we sat at the small table in a cozy restaurant, chatting about everything and nothing, I felt a warmth spread through me. Rachel was my anchor, my reminder that the world wasn't as dark as it had felt during the worst moments of my life. She had been there for me when I needed her the most, and now with each passing day I was learning to stand on my own again. Melissa, she said, her voice soft. I'm proud of you. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've come so far. Her words hit me unexpectedly. I hadn't realized how much I had changed until someone else pointed it out. I had spent so much time focusing on surviving, on pushing through the pain, that I hadn't noticed how much I had grown. I wasn't the same person who had cried herself to sleep for months after Joshua's betrayal. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone more whole. Thank you, I replied quietly, my voice thick with emotion. I'm still learning, but I think I'm finally starting to understand who I am again. And in that moment I knew it was true. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by the relationships I had with others, especially Joshua, that I had forgotten who I was on my own. But now, with each passing day, I was rediscovering the woman I had once been, the woman I had buried beneath the weight of love and loss. And it felt good. As the night wore on, I realized something else. I wasn't in a rush anymore. There was no urgency to move on or get over it. There was only the present, only the quiet but steady growth that was unfolding within me. I wasn't defined by the end of my marriage. I wasn't defined by betrayal or loss. I was defined by my own resilience, my own journey, and my own strength. When Rachel and I parted ways, I walked back to my apartment, my mind calm, my heart at peace. I knew that I had a long road ahead, but I was no longer afraid of what it would bring. I had learned how to stand on my own, how to be my own source of strength, and how to move forward no matter what. This was my new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The weeks that followed my night out with Rachel felt different. I had stepped over the threshold of recovery, and now I was walking through a doorway that I had once thought was locked forever. I didn't expect this kind of peace so soon. The pain, the anger, it wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. I was no longer merely surviving. I was living. And with that came the realization that I had the power to shape my future, not just heal from the past. I woke up one morning with a rare sense of clarity, my body no longer weighed down by the constant exhaustion that had plagued me since the split. The phone sat on my bedside table, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel compelled to check it. No messages from Joshua, no missed calls. There was just the quiet hum of the morning, the soft light creeping through the blinds. It felt like the world was moving on with or without me. But this time I wasn't afraid of being left behind. I stepped into the kitchen, my bare feet pressing against the cool tiles, and began to make coffee. My coffee, not the kind we used to share. I took in the small, soothing ritual, letting the warmth of the cup fill my hands, knowing that I had earned this moment of peace. Each sip tasted like a promise. To myself, to my future. I had started a new routine. Nothing drastic. Just small things that reminded me that I could still make choices for myself. I spent mornings at the gym working out not just my body but my mind, letting go of the anger, the hurt, the resentment. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had always been there, even when I hadn't been able to see them through the fog of my marriage. We laughed, we reminisced, and slowly my social world began to fill in the empty spaces that Joshua's presence had once dominated. But what mattered most was the change inside me. I had let go of the constant need for validation from others, especially from someone like Joshua. I realized that, before all of this, I had placed too much of my identity in our relationship. I had let myself be defined by the man I loved, by the life we had built, and when that life crumbled, so did I. It took time to recognize that, beyond the relationship, I was still me. I was still capable of joy, of success, of building a future. And no one, not even Joshua, could take that away from me. As the weeks passed, I found myself more open to the idea of moving forward. Of meeting someone new, not to replace what I'd lost but to share something authentic. Yet the thought didn't rush me. I was in no rush. I had learned that love, the right kind, would come when it was meant to. There was no need to force it. One afternoon, a message popped up on my phone, and it wasn't from Joshua. It was from a colleague, Michael, who I'd worked with on a few projects. We'd exchanged pleasantries before, but never anything personal. His message was simple. Hey, I hope you're doing well. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up. I stared at the message for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the screen. It had been a while since I had opened myself up to anything resembling romance. But the message felt different. Felt casual, friendly. No pressure. I was at a point in my life where I was finally comfortable with myself, and I realized that if I wanted to, I could explore this without it overshadowing my healing process. I typed out a reply. Sure, coffee sounds nice. It wasn't a promise of anything more, but it was a step. And in that moment I realized something significant. I wasn't just moving forward in my life. I was embracing it. I wasn't running from the past, I was letting it go. Every choice I made now felt like an opportunity to reclaim parts of myself that I had buried. The fear of being hurt again was there, but it didn't paralyze me anymore. It was just another part of the journey. The coffee date with Michael was easy, comfortable even. We spoke about work, about hobbies, and about life in general. There was no awkwardness, no expectation. It felt like two people getting to know each other without the burden of history weighing them down. As the conversation flowed, I realized how much I had missed those simple human connections. No strings attached, just the freedom to enjoy someone's company. Afterwards, we said our goodbyes and I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. There was no rush, no pressure to make anything more of it. But I didn't close the door either. I wasn't sure where this would go, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to see where it might lead. In the weeks that followed, I continued to explore life on my own terms. I found new hobbies, started traveling a bit, and worked on my career with a focus I hadn't had before. My days no longer revolved around the drama of my past. I took back control. And with each passing day, I felt stronger, more certain that I had made the right decision by walking away from my marriage. Joshua's attempts to re-enter my life became fewer and fewer. After that last confrontation, I think he finally understood that I was no longer the woman he had known. I wasn't going to accept the scraps he was offering. I deserved more and I was going to get it on my own terms. His calls stopped. The messages faded away into nothing. And I was okay with that. In fact, I welcomed the silence. There was one final moment that cemented my closure. Came unexpectedly one evening when I was out with friends. I saw him across the street walking with someone else, someone new. For a moment I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't the familiar ache of heartbreak. It was just a simple realization he was moving on too. And so was I. The next few months went by in a blur of personal victories, small and large. I became more involved in my work, achieving things I hadn't thought possible just a year ago. I made new friends, deepened old relationships, and found peace in my solitude. But I also allowed myself to open up to new experiences, new people without the burden of fear holding me back. One day as I sat in the park with my coffee watching the world pass by, I felt something shift deep within me. I was no longer the woman trapped in her own heartbreak, struggling to heal. I was a woman who had faced her pain head-on and emerged stronger, more confident. I had learned how to live for myself, not for anyone else. And that, in itself, was the greatest victory. I had finally turned the page of my story. The old chapter had closed and the new one, full of possibility and hope, had begun.